Let's call our work session to order. And I believe that we have one delegation that's going to speak to us tonight. So, Brother Gary.
All right, so I'll read this delegate statement. Thank you for your interest in addressing the Hamilton County Board of Education. During your presentation, please address the board as a whole, not individual board members or administrators. Also, please do not present complaints or concerns you have about an individual employee of the school system. If you wish to voice those complaints or concerns, you should contact the central office and ask for a meeting with the superintendent, since the superintendent is responsible for individual employees. Please limit your remarks to 5 minutes. I will tell you when there's 1 minute left, and you may begin when you're ready. And our speaker is Ms. Heather Modrow.
Thank you. Is it on? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Heather Modrow. I am a teacher at Normal Park. If you know anything about me, I know it's been a while, you know I'm a strong advocate for my students and those who feel like they do not have a voice. Recently, the county sent out a survey to hear the voices of families and staff around the proposed calendar, but did not listen to those respond to those voices as they advocated for their wants and needs. This is why I'm standing before you today. One set of results from the survey I would like to share with you are about the half days. It stated 22% of families and 36% of staff agree or strongly agree that they prefer the calendar to have 4 half days for teacher planning rather than 2 full days. Let's think about that. First, the questions on the survey were selectively worded to encourage people to choose what the county was already proposing. Despite that, people still let it be known that half days for teacher planning are not what's best for children. Let's take those results and rewrite it to what people actually wanted. 78% of families and 64% of staff agree or strongly agree that they prefer the calendar to have 2 full days of teacher planning rather than 4 half days. Let's take a look at the calendar for half days. There are 5 half days on Wednesdays for teacher planning: August 27th, September 17th, November 12th, February 4th, and April 8th. While we greatly appreciate the time for teaching and planning, half days are not the answer, especially in the middle of the week. Half days in the middle of the week are not productive and are actually disruptive for students and families. Half days, at least in the elementary level, are not productive for students. Often schedules are changed to fit in related arts, lunch, and everything else we have to get done within a day. And as a specialist, I find it nearly impossible to see any of my students, even though we're there for half a day. My day is taken up prioritizing the needs of those who find their day disruptive because they can't handle the change in the routine. So I see no students other than the ones who can't be in the classroom. Who picked Wednesday? I don't know. Again, we're in a good routine for the week when we abruptly change our schedule in the middle of the week, and Thursday is just another Monday. 1 half a day really does have a great impact on the entire week. There's a reason why national holidays are celebrated on Mondays whenever possible. Now that I've shared why it's a bad idea for student learning, let me share why 78% of families think it's a poor idea. For many families, it's an inconvenience. For others, it's an impossibility. I've known several students who do not attend at all on half days because of transportation or childcare issues. For some of our students, no one would be home when they are dismissed, so they have to find child arrangements. They can't do that in the middle of the day, so they spend the whole day home. Oftentimes, those are the students that need to be there. Not only are they missing a half day, they're missing the entire day of instruction. Instead, I propose we take these 5 half-day Wednesdays and turn them into 2 planning days like families and teachers requested on the survey that was sent out. I propose one to be mid-September on a Monday or a Friday, not Wednesday. And the second one, mid-third quarter, February, Monday or Friday. Families that are able to can have a long weekend. And teachers can have that longer, uninterrupted planning time that we have been begging for. The half days at the end of the semester are helpful, as they're at the end of the week and filled with fun activities like winter, class parties, sing-alongs, end of the school celebrations. Half days are better for those days, as students really do limited activities, academic activities, as well as we are wrapping up the semester. The fun activities encourage parents to send their children whenever possible. If you must do half days, please do them on Friday. Let's minimize learning disruption. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mariella. Before you begin, we've all got this packet that Mary Ellen's going to speak to. I just want to point out this picture on the front is the ag program at Hickson High School, and they do an amazing job. And 2 weeks from Saturday is when they sell all their plants. So if you're a gardener and you want some tomato plants or pepper plants or just an array of different things, on that Saturday morning, then they have a sale. And you go up there and buy those plants. And I just want to get that plug in there. Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Not this coming Saturday, the following?
Yes, a week from this Saturday. Yeah.
Chairman, I'm going to start us off and go into a little bit and then turn it over to Mary Ellen and let Mary Ellen get into the details of it. So as we get budget season started, I want to ground us again in our just cause that all children thrive and experience a future without limits. Of course, as we go through, we'll be aligning to our mission and vision. A couple of things on our beliefs that I keep pointing out, and I've been pointing this out for several months now, is that public education is the foundation of our community, and that it's a community responsibility to remove barriers for student success or limiting student success. As I mentioned, State of the System, we've kind of regrounded ourselves and our values and are starting to tie our values to our commitments. This is a belief that our values actually drive our everyday work. And so as we refocus on these values, you'll see them come up multiple times during budget season. Reminder of budget, we have been doing priority-based budgeting in Hamilton County schools for, off the top of my head, 4 or 5 cycles. So for a while now, we should be used to that, where we're aligning every dollar that we spend to one of our commitments. And so as we go through this, you'll keep hearing that word come up, priority-based budgeting. Several years ago, we were having debates about zero-based budgeting. We know why that's not really a practical way for us to do it, but industry standard for K through 12 is priority-based budgeting. And so keep these commitments in mind as we go forward. So timeline, want to just kind of put a pin in this right here for a second. I had a meeting this morning with the mayor and his staff, been talking to Mr. Perez on Finance Committee to talk about timeline. We originally had talked about, in our normal schedule, is to try to vote on budget in April. That timeline is really not in line with what the county commission and the mayor's office is thinking. And so they are not planning on voting on the full budget until June, which means that there's no rush for us to vote till in April. And so we're going to push that back for several reasons. Number one, to align better with what they're doing, but also it gives us the ability to get better projections. We'll have another month of sales tax information and be able to make better revenue projections as we go forward. Another thing out of that meeting this morning that I want to kind of point out and talk about, they're changing, and I spoke to Commissioner Eversole about this, changing the way that they are doing their budgeting process. They're putting committees together, so there will be a committee on the education budget. Dr. Highlander is chairing that committee, and so we will present our budget to that committee. It won't be the way that we've done in the past, where either go before the full county commission at the courthouse or go to the McDaniel building and present there. We'll present it to the committee, and then the committees will bring budget to a whole for the county commission to vote on. We don't have the date set with Commissioner Highlander yet. We'll work on that in the next several days, but as soon as we have those, we'll get them to you. I know of at least 2 other commissioners that serve on that in an official role. It's Commissioner Graham and Commissioner Sharp. So we would invite, of course, hope Mr. Perez will make his way there, and would invite anyone else that wants to come to those meetings. You're more than welcome. And so as we get those scheduled, we'll let you know, but this timeline is going to be adjusted. And the first adjustment you'll see is next week. We had originally scheduled a committee workshop meeting. We're not going to have that next week, and we'll push that to a later date. Pause right there just to see if there are any questions about timeline.
Our individual meetings that we had booked, we still gonna have those, or?
Glad you brought it up. I believe that we should. Those are hard to schedule with your schedules and with my schedule, so we've got them. I think that we've got enough information that we can talk about the big picture. And so I would prefer to keep them as they are. If any of you would prefer to change them, we're open to changing them, but if it works with your schedule, I'd prefer to leave them as they are.
Oh, I said I don't even know what mine is. I think I just
You'll
put
get
it
an
into a date.
invitation, you'll get a calendar invitation from Mary Ellen's assistant.
I remember committing to a date, I just don't know the date.
I can send it all out to you.
Yep.
That's all I already got one. I already got one. Middle one.
Any, so questions about schedule, questions about the change in the format with the committees of the county commission?
Just, what is their intention with that? Like,
They're going to committees for everything. So like the sheriff's office will present to a committee. They'll have a highway department committee. I think that my understanding with talking to the mayor's office and the mayor and then Commissioner Eversole is that the idea that the budget is so big that if you get a couple commissioners to focus on a specific area, kind of become experts in it, then when it comes back to the whole, there's more clarity around what's in each individual budget. I'm personally, I'm kind of actually interested. I think it might work better for us. It won't get caught up in so many weeds. Have a little bit more time to explain to you.
So it'll be pushed back then to our May meeting? Is that
Yes,
what
sir.
I hear you saying? Okay.
Recommending, I mean, if there's obviously will of the board, we'll defer to that, but I don't see any reason why we would rush to vote in April if the county commission's not planning on voting until June.
Mr. Finance Chair, are you okay with that?
yeah, I mean, we've talked, we want the best revenue projections so that we can make the best budget, decisions that need to be made. My concern is less about us, more about the commission, right? You know, if this new process they're putting into place, this new, you know, all these things happening, you know, and Ms. Thurman reminds us often, we have voted budgets in later, but we really would hope that June we get a decision that aligns, because we've met with their committees, that aligns very clearly with what this board established as priorities, right? I don't think any of us appreciate, I wasn't here in June of last year thinking that it was gonna be a very low month and I could visit family. And then I was very surprised watching online that the budget we voted on was not agreed to at the commission, and that puts us then in a very quick bind to have to decide what we have to decide, right? So somehow the timing, that's where my concern is. It's not on us in May, because it doesn't make a difference if they're not gonna vote on it till June. It's on a decision on their part, if that's delayed, how that will affect us as a school system. So hopefully they understand that as they move to committees as well.
So the 28th is been canceled.
Yes, ma'am.
Gary?
I'm just curious also for this coming year, I mean, I know as we go in, we did something last year that we've never done before as a board by taking money that we put into our budget and then deferring it into a different into a bond. Are there other things that we're gonna learn about before we do that? Are there things that the county commission is gonna share that they would like to see, or?
I mean, what I'm hopeful of is that the committee and us being able to meet with that committee multiple times, that we won't run into that
Okay.
issue. And to clarify, this board was put in a tough position. It was the county commission's decision to withhold that
Right.
$6 million.
Oh, no, I
Right,
know.
and so we approved a budget that reflected that decision. What I'm hopeful is that the committee will meet multiple times leading up to May vote, and that when, to Mr. Perez's point, that May vote is reflective of what that committee will
Agreed
will
upon, or?
build consensus around.
Then I would definitely be attending those meetings.
Are there no more questions? I've got a couple more slides, and I'll turn it over to Mary Ellen. So we've done some listening community. Not when I say community, this is parents, it's community, but it's also our teachers through the teachers cabinet. We've worked with HCA and other members through PECA. And here are some priorities that we are seeing come out of those conversations. And what I'm happy about is that they align a lot with the things that the administration has been talking about, and I think things that many of you have been talking about. I'm going to point out two under Every Student Learns: the K-8 intervention and gap closure, and then the K-2 literacy. Well, that's going to continue to be a focus. What we're seeing this year, even in Q3 benchmarks, is that we're continuing to grow and get better, but the gaps are not changing. So as everybody's moving at about the same speed, in some cases the gaps are actually getting bigger. And so going to be a renewed focus there, and spoke to principals yesterday about getting their input on what we need to adjust as we move forward. Again, under Every Student Belongs, you see again well-being supports, and then the extracurriculars and arts education that's continued to be a priority. Under Every School Equipped, high quality instructional materials, safe, secure schools, and then concentrated supports for students with high needs. I'm going to point out one, actually two big on the employee value, the compensation and benefits. You'll see us talk about this here in a little bit, but that's priority of the administration. I know it's a priority of this board. And then employee satisfaction. This is something that we've been working with the teachers cabinet on, and have engaged with Gallup to get some initial idea of where we stand. We know that we've got to get better. What the community is saying is we want you to get better, and so this is helpful for us to see this not only in what we're saying, what teachers are saying, but what the community is saying as well. And then finally, Every Community Serve, looking at, again, the next iteration of Future Ready Institutes, of improving work-based learning, pre-apprenticeships, and that work with Build Within that was announced about a year ago. We should start seeing some dividends from there. So the community is, I think, anticipating seeing those opportunities for kids. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary Ellen to talk about revenue projections and some rough numbers.
Yeah, so wanted to kind of give a perspective on some current revenue trends we're looking at this year, and then where we're looking. But again, there's still a lot on TISA and on our tax revenues, just seeing where those end up for the year. So if you look at the property tax, so our projections, you know, we're pretty close to on track. You do see a decrease from last year, but again, that's the money that we talked about that's going towards the bond issue. We've done most of our collections to this point, but there's, you know, a few more months. So those kind of come between October and February where most of our collections are, but we do have some additional collections. So we're still monitoring that to see where that works out, and working closely with the county to make sure we understand like each of the components, because our property tax number, there's several different components of it. That's not just the one property tax bill for this year. It includes some past year collections, interest, so there's layers to it, and so it's a sort of blended rate when we look at the growth, and we'll talk about that. And then on sales tax, you'll see it is up from last year. Again, we get that, that's a monthly, and we're actually 2 months behind when we get so we've gotten December numbers, but not January, so that takes a little while to catch up and see how that goes. December was very strong. So people had a good Christmas and holiday season, but some of the other months were a little slower. So it's, we've, seen past years just really, really strong growth in sales tax, and that is definitely slowing down. So I think with inflation and other things, I think some of the spending areas are not going gangbusters like they were. So when we're looking at our assumptions, we will align to the county projections. So for sales tax, again, with that slowing, we're looking at that 2% growth. For this year, we had projected about 5%. Again, we'll see whether we hit that number, but we think next year 2%. But again, we'll wait and see kind of what the county looks. We'll look at also the state kind of projections on what they're expecting on that. Property tax, I think the actual property tax might be, I think they're looking at that in the county like 2.5%. But again, they're still working through those numbers. But then when you blend it with the other taxes that blend into that number, it'd be probably closer to 2% for our growth. We do have the initial February projections for TISA. It looks about a 3% increase over the prior year, but that's got several assumptions. So fiscal capacity is a big driver on how much we actually get from the TISA. So it looks at our overall formula, but the share of what's from the state contribution to the local contribution can have a big variability if there's been a lot of change in the fiscal capacity of our county compared to the other counties. When we look at our contribution, so not to go too deep into the TISA, but for the base and the weights, it's a 70-30 split between the state and counties overall. But our county actually pays 38%. So again, our county is stronger than others, so that does have us put in more than other counties have to put in for their share. And again, we won't know those fiscal capacity rates until later. We are eagerly awaiting the March projection. And there's also been a lot of movement. They made a lot of assumptions in the TISA numbers for last year. And so some of the ADM numbers that go into it's a lot of pieces to the formula. So we're pushing on a few things just to make sure we have some consistency there. I'll show a little bit more on that. So if you'll remember, there's basically 3 components: the base, the weights, and the direct. In the base, again, that's our ADM, just base enrollment. The total number for the per student has increased. And that's where the 3% really is seen strongly there. But in the weights, there's a lot of variability in the ADM on that. So probably the 3 biggest are in our English learners. Before they were using the student direct data, we actually have to do an ILP for each of the students. And so the timing on getting those all loaded in the system and getting those tracked properly, they're going to give us credit for what we get done at the end of the year, but we're still entering all of those, so that our numbers are a little lower than we're hoping they will be at the end of the year. Dyslexia is another one. So students with characteristics of dyslexia, last year they just used 5% of our enrollment, and now they're actually looking at our ILPDs that we have in the system. And again, working to get those in the system. They'll give us credit for the full year, but they're still processing those after testing. And I think the middle school testing was put off to the spring, so that's taken some time to get caught up on those. So our current projections overall are lower than we're hoping these TISA numbers will be, but again, that's another reason to support waiting to get further in, at least another month or 2 of projections in our numbers.
So regarding our contribution as a community, and this is both a question, but also I think something that our community needs to understand, right? That Hamilton County is contributing 38% versus 30%.
Correct.
But I do know that there's been discussion about, through class and others, about somehow that contribution being more equal. Is there anything that's happened in that regard at any point where how we are being weighted?
There were significant adjustments to it last year with TISA. I have not heard anything that will adjust that weight.
Okay.
New.
Just checking.
Now, in our class meeting, Larry was there, and then they said that to expect roughly the same amount for this year as what they were given, but then possibly to drop off the following year.
Well, yeah, those are, yes.
But also, the only increase was the $75 for, that they added in for capital maintenance per person, but yeah, 7,075.
Okay. And then the directs, those are looking strong, so I think our investment that we made last year in CTE, that was one of the numbers that we were trying to drive up. That's all state contribution, and we did see return in that. So I think that was a good investment. And this does not include the outcomes funding, so you'll see a little bit more on that. This is just the base TISA model. And so using those assumptions, we've built kind of an initial, again, first look at the operating revenue. And so when we run TISA formulas, it's the component of state and local, so you can see those numbers that we reflected from the previous page. So it shows that the TISA contribution for the county has gone up $3 million. So when we look at our increased projected revenue for the county, part of $3 million of that has to go straight to just the TISA formula. So then that leaves the additional local an increase of 2.3. And so that's all based on those 2% growth assumptions. That's where the split of that would be. And again, the outcomes, we've just using the projected 24 numbers that we've gotten 2 payments on that, so we've gotten most of it. So that's what we're using for next year's projections. And then the operating revenue, the big decreases there is the indirects that we got on ESSER. So that we had that projected about $500,000 for this year, and we won't have that for next year. And then some other, small increases in some sections. So overall, today's numbers would see about a $12.7 million increase, and that it's a good number, but it's still there's annual increases from our contracts and a lot of different things that goes much more quickly than you would like to see. And then if you look at our in the projected, I've gone on and adjusted, kind of added the outcomes because we didn't have that in our original budget. So our difference to our approved budget is adding the TISA outcomes and then the actual TISA, because we did an early projection on the TISA. When we got the final numbers, it was about $1 million lower, which was a combination of a change in the contribution that we had to make. So because other districts had some big increases in some other ADMs, we had to put more in for our 38%. Because it said overall, even though our numbers didn't change as much, because other people had more, we had to contribute our share of the 38% because there was growth in overall TISA. So what happens in other counties does change what we have to put in. So then pulling that all together to kind of step up to the high, overall budget. So there's our operating revenue, our state grants, so that there's the 2 biggest components in there are the ISM grant. So that's why it's so much bigger than it was, 3 years ago, because that's an ongoing grant. We put in the whole budget, but it's rolling over from year to year. So the decreases basically represents kind of what we've spent this year on the ISM grant. And then the other piece in there is pre-K. And then in federal, so we have put in the projected, so it includes all the amendments that we've had to date on federal. So at any grants that we've gotten in during the year, because when we budget the initial amount, we put in the grants that we have confirmation that we're going to get, and then during the year some different things are released. So we would expect during the year that $36 million would increase, but it's not going to close that whole gap, because there's just in 24 and prior we have had a lot of additional funds from different things for Tennessee All-Course and some different things that have been in these grants that will not be there because of the ending of the ESSER funds. So there were lots of funds from ESSER that came through in different ways, not directly from our ESSER funds. And then on self-funded, some small increases in a couple of those, and then school nutrition is pretty steady with their funds. And then as you'll see, ESSER 3, this is the last year. We may end up having a little bit of carryover to finish out a few projects. I think there's a charter school project that may need to continue, but right now we're not anticipating that being in the budget, and we'll know as we get closer to the end of the year. So the FY24 projected, again, that includes all the amendments of additional grants that have come in during this year, but it would show that from kind of our peak of this year, it'd be a $68 million decrease in our overall budget. And again, that's primarily ESSER, but again, other related items to ESSER, and showing that, we've been using our funds for a lot of great things, but now we're really having to, as we prioritize what we're continuing. Again, looking at literacy, that's, I think, a lot of the funds that have come in extra were really related to literacy, and so how do we fund that in our base operating is definitely a big consideration. And so you can see that number at the bottom, the 42 million, those are kind of the additional grants that have come in during the year, or revisions to estimates where we got an initial estimate and then we had some additional carry forward. So any questions? I know it's a lot trying to get out there, but just kind of start with some general directions of where the budget's going.
So regarding federal and ESSER, I mean, I know we directed a lot of ESSER to things we knew we would wrap up. Federal, I'm not as sure, right? So obviously, loss of together $76 million has an impact, right? So what directly do we know is impacted by the loss of those funds?
Yeah, so same thing with a lot of those funds, and I'll give you a good example. And I mean, I generally refer to those as like COVID relief dollars. So if you remember, we've accepted at least 2 pretty significant grants for our school-age child care program that was meant to retain employees, help with wages, also improve equipment and things like that. So that $20+ million you see going away, a lot of it is things like the SACC grants that kind of sustain those programs. We've done a lot of one-time spending with those, several playground upgrades throughout the county and things like that. So this board's been talking for almost 3 years now about this moment, right? And you guys have done a good job of holding us accountable, of getting ready for this moment, so that when you see a large number that's gone, we're as ready for it as we can be. Of course, we'd love to see it come back, but we've got to get ready. We've been getting ready for it, we're ready for it. I think that, to Mary Ellen's point, the tutoring, help continuing to sustain that, sustaining summer reach, some of those things is where we're going to feel the squeeze the most.
Here? I have a couple questions. Have we gotten any guarantees on a couple of the grants from local organizations to help with the tutor?
Not yet. We're still working on that and had a couple recent meetings around it. So we're hopeful and think we can do things differently. We're talking about with one partner about, you know, how do we get school to invest some of their supplemental that's matched by different organizations. So we're working on those partnerships.
And I kicked this dead horse last year, but he's still laying there, so I'm gonna kick him again. Property tax, they're giving us 2%. That's 2% increase.
It's 2% growth. I want to be
Growth
clear.
above what they gave us last year then.
That's what we're projecting.
Okay.
And again, we've got to go through this budget process. You know, had a pretty frank conversation with mayor staff this morning about that, is that the reality of where we are is that the millage rate, the percentage of property tax we're getting, is the lowest it has ever
Right.
been in the history of Hamilton County schools.
And
So
we've got growth in the county at the greatest level that we've ever seen in Hamilton County.
Well, again, it's not called, I was almost called it stabilization, but equalization works that as properties have grown and we've grown, the equalization is put it in place and it comes back to hurt us. And so I give people this example, right? 2008, if you bought a house that was worth $100,000, and today you bought a house that was worth $100,000, you were actually paying more in property tax in 2008 than you are today on a $100,000 house. That doesn't make sense, right? I mean, you would think, but what's happened is that $100,000 house in 2008 has turned into now a $300,000 house because of that property values and everything else. And so we've lowered that millage rate so the county revenue equalizes. So that's part of the problem. But the other problem is, again, like last year when that $6 million was withheld, our percentage of the millage rate went down. We're at 43%. So 43% of all local property tax dollars comes to county schools. The other portion goes to county general government, then about 0.5% to 1% goes to roads. At the height, we were getting 54%. I think that was in 2008, maybe, somewhere around there. We were getting 54% of it, and county general government was getting 45%. And so this is the first budget that those of you that have been on the board for more than a few years will know. This is like a normal budget now. We've kind of been spoiled since FY20 with COVID relief dollars, with increase in TISA, but this is where you start to feel like the tightness of what school budgets, especially systems our size, will fill.
Well, I guess my question, so, I was trying to think which commissioner said it yesterday. So in the meeting yesterday, they were discussing what hits directly to me, property right across from my yard. And they're bringing in 447 units into that. The tax that was paid out in that farm was $4,000 a year. When that's completed in 3 years, the tax that it will be increased by $4 million. And that's just the one location on Snow Hill. They've got another one that just completed the 300th home in a year and a half. You can figure 300 now, that's probably 3 million extra. Is this 2% a set number, or is it a number that we can negotiate, or?
No, it's a set number, but it may go up. It may, when we talk to the county, they may say, no, we're actually projecting 3%. We're being conservative here, but again, like, I think this is where we've got to get information and education out to general public, and I'm going to talk in very layman terms. But the reason we're paying less on that $100,000 house today is because of that $3 million project. Because that increases the revenue for the county, but through equalization, that $100,000 house is paying less today than it was in 2008, right?
It's hard for me to preach that, so that's, yes, I need to, and that might be a good thing to discuss in our individual meetings.
Yeah, and I think it's, a conversation to have in the committee meeting. It's a conversation for us to have publicly, but they're, historically speaking, this is the lowest investment in public education that the county has ever had.
Right.
In
And-
terms
and
of
they
percent
have
of the over budget.
And where I see as
We
an
are getting
area
more
that
money.
they could help
Sure.
us the
We're
most.
getting more money.
Absolutely, but county government's getting more money as well, right?
And
just-
I see sales tax as a could-be thing,
It's almost
month to month,
impossible
they
to
might
predict.
sell- Right, but I see property tax, it's a constant, everything from every meeting I've been at, when we were in Saudi Daisy for the facility meetings, gentlemen, projected 500 to 600 new homes within the next year. I mean, the growth is happening, but our percentage of property tax is not being increased, and that's where they could probably help us the most, and that's
Yeah.
my concern.
I mean, I think the next reappraisal is maybe next year. I don't know if Ms. Robinson, if you would know that off the top of your head in your business, but I think the next property reappraisal is next year. And that's the opportunity that the millage rate, talked about it 4 years ago. If the millage rate stayed the same, how much more for county general government and for the schools it would generate if you just left the millage rate where it is. And so those are the conversations that we're gonna have to start having again, because we don't have the benefit of COVID relief dollars. We don't have the benefit of additional state dollars coming in.
And I think if I just want to clarify, so it's our 2%, I mean, that, they're projecting 2 to 2.5% of growth, and so it's just, but when the bill comes in, it just follows whatever our share of the total is. So they're not, it's not that they're saying they're thinking 6% and we get 2, it's, they're thinking the whole pot is gonna go true because of this equalization. So to change our increase from 2%, it would have to change the split of funds or change the millage rate. Those are so it's really our millage rate that gets accounted for out of the bill.
One of the reasons we need to push this back, though, is this is probably not what you're gonna be looking at. These numbers are probably not what you're gonna be looking at in a month, right? I mean, these are very rough. A lot on this could change from local, from state, other areas. So,
Can I follow up on, I know we have other people, but I want to follow up on that just for the general public. Which is, again, we also have to understand that with growth, possibly, we can't guarantee, there's also future investment in more space or more education, right? So these houses may have families with children who need space. And at a 2% increase of property taxes, we're seeing a squeeze in our costs because costs are going up much higher than 2% a year. So we're seeing a squeeze, and yet we're looking at the development that's coming. So as an example, with all the discussion about the development happening in the Wheelan property and how we're assured that those property taxes are still going to be received for the education, there's also going to be thousands of apartments and homes being built, which possibly will require investment in more buildings for education. So it's not helping us grow our education pot, it's pushing that. And I said it last year, same as with you, like, we are seeing explosions of buildings everywhere, and apparently only 2% increase of revenue and property tax in the entire county. We got media, I don't do magic math, so I don't understand how that's still possible, other than we're missing an opportunity with the growth that does come at a greater cost to education. So, sorry.
Ms. Black?
I had a couple of things. That is a concern of mine as well, is that being constricted, when we're seeing the squeeze, like, we're not able to keep up with the demand. Because if all this housing is going in and families are coming, that means more students for our school system, and we're barely able to sustain what we already have and not project and for that growth to keep up with demand. And I think that's one thing that has happened over the last 20 years that has also contributed to our facilities issues. If we're over here trying to take care of what's not been done, and then we can't keep up on this side, we're always going to be behind unless we change the way we're doing business. That is a concern. The other thing I wanted to ask about is, the ESSER funds going away, Summer Reach. I know that's an incredibly important program. How have we planned to absorb some of those costs? Are we going to have to decrease the sites? Are we going to have to decrease the days, the spots that kids have? Like, what are we doing to make up for the loss of that?
We're doing exactly that. It's decreasing sites is where we're starting. We still hope to be able to serve every single child that asks to be served, with our, of course, targeting our highest need kids. But we're decreasing middle schools. I think we're decreasing middle schools by 4 and elementary schools by 6, I believe. And high schools are only running a credit recovery program, and they're funding it out of their own pots, which last year we provided funding there. But to your point, it's still a heavy lift and something that we will have to fully absorb in future years.
Nate?
Okay, getting back to the $100,000 house in 2008, at that 16 years, have we not have the value reassessed?
again, like, hear me, what I'm saying is I'm saying if it's $100,000 in 10 years ago and still $100,000 today, right? But you're right, property value has gone up and that's what's created. But the millage rate and what we're paying per $100,000 is lower today than it was then.
Oh, it's lower per,
Yes.
okay. Even though the value, the tax rate is 25% of the value, the tax rate is lower, okay.
They lowered it to-
Somehow I didn't notice that when I wrote my check.
Well,
And-
but again, your property value is going up,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, oh yeah. Part two, the benchmark that has just been completed, does it show that whatever we've been doing this school year has improved the literacy?
I'll let Dr. Stewart address it, but
Okay.
really positive.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, we were sharing the results just yesterday with SLT and got to have a good conversation with the principals. When you roll our benchmarks just all the way up by content area, so math, English, science, and social studies, and of course we look at that data 4 ways. One is meeting projections. Are the kids doing what we expect them to do based on their prior trends? 2, are they moving forward or backwards? 3, proficiency. Are they passing the test, mastering the standards? And 4 is what we call micro level, which is just the rate, how fast they're growing. In every single content area, in every single one of those 4 lanes, we have improved from last year and are significantly improved from 2
I
years,
just didn't
2
know
years
if
ago.
we needed to push in any area more.
No, I mean,
Sorry.
yeah, I mean, I would say that's happening because we have some very targeted plans, but some of the things that is reflected in this squeeze are things like tutoring. It's things like intervention. To be able to sustain that growth is going to be really, really important. The exciting thing about the data is that not only is it up everywhere, but it's up in every single learning community. So if you were to look at that same graph by learning community, you're seeing increases all over the map. But the sustainability of that growth is what troubles us when we look at this budget.
Okay, thank you.
Ben?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to say it again because it's really important that we talk about the millage rate again and again and again, because percentages is one of the best ways to make sure that the dollars that the community are bringing in, the county is bringing in, are the most equitably shared. Knowing that it's gone down in percentage, but still up in money, doesn't mean that we are funding our schools to the correct amount. An apple doesn't cost what an apple cost a year ago, doesn't cost what it cost 10 years ago, 16, or even all the way back to, was it 1994 when we were at 53% of the millage rate? And then to also say this, as somebody who's been a moderator on the spelling bee, I like looking at the Latin words for things. I like understanding things, and I hate when acronyms aren't explained. So the millage rate, mill means thousandth, and it is simply stating that it is the percent that you're taxed per $1,000 of property tax. Again, it's always great to learn about it, to understand the things, and to know what we're talking about. So my question, and I believe Dr. Robertson has this number. If not, I think it's something that would be important to get. FY24, we were funded at 43% of the millage rate came to us. The difference, if we got that to 50-50, do you know the dollar amount?
If it went to the highest that it was for us, I believe that year would have been 2008 off the top of my head. It's about 31 million. So if you went to, say you did 49.5, and 1% went to roads, because roads part of that. Quick math, I mean, you're probably looking somewhere around 21 to 24 million, something like that.
So an increase of 2 times our capital maintenance budget at current in our last budget. Just if we got back to our fair share of it. Yeah, if you count the 10,000 or 10 million that's in there.
And again,
you know.
to be clear, that's without a tax increase. That's
Correct.
literally just using the pot as it is and equalizing.
Moving it back to the way that it was before. So again, I think it's important that the general public and that this body continues to focus on ways that we can increase the funding to the proper amount for our schools without ever putting another hand into a taxpayer's pocket. Simply making the correct proportions go to schools and go to the county government as they had been in the past.
I hate to even talk. But does that include, that percentage rate is less because they're taking part of that money and putting it aside for the
That's
6
right.
million?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit
Well, it still would,
disingenuous, really.
even without that, it still would have been the lowest. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
you can see it since
Yeah.
2000, I'd say 2015, I think, is the last time it leveled, and it's been
But
going
does that have
since.
something to do with the state? I know the state controls what we can do as far as when we increase taxes about the millage rate. That's a state thing, am I wrong?
There's a component there, but again, if you, we had this conversation in 2000 and 19 going into FY 20, and if you remember, there was this moment where if we had held the millage rate, it would have generated, I think it was like $37 million more dollars, and there was an extended conversation about that. And so, you know, there are opportunities when the reevaluation comes out to hold the millage rate as is. Now, you've got to have a vote on that and all that, but, you know, we've made decision after decision to keep lowering it so it equalizes the taxes. When I say we, I'm talking about as a community.
I just want to be
clear,
not we on the board.
Yeah, that's a good point. You got to catch me when I say that.
But so I think we keep saying the same thing. What you're saying, Ben, if I understand correctly, is let's forget the increase or decrease of the millage rate. As the millage rate has stayed the same, the contribution to Hamilton County Public Schools has decreased in percentage, and the contribution to other things that the county needs to spend on has increased. So that's where you're saying we used to get of the full pot, 53% at the highest. Today we're at 43%. So of the full pot, we are getting less and less and less every single time. And so when I get teachers, rightly so, upset because they're already looking at their budget and one of them is going to have to be removed, part of it is, I'm not putting it all on it's complicated, it's complex, but part of it is we are continuing to be squeezed further and further. And at some point, we have to make decisions because as we saw last year, we can go to the county and we could present a budget and then the county can say, you know, rightly so, as Ms. Thurman has advocated every year that we need to increase our maintenance investments. And then the county can say, no, we're going to pull that and we're going to deal with that separately within our own context. And so we keep getting squeezed. And their fear, I'll say this last thing, was because they didn't want to keep the maintenance of effort at the same height. That was the concern. If we keep the maintenance of effort at this level, we're going to have to, by law, continue to contribute to Hamilton County at that level. So we're going to move that so that we're not obligated to that contribution every year. So that's the effect, right? It's we keep getting squeezed while other expenses, and to be honest, that's why I was worried about the committees. It just depends which committee's louder will get the majority of funds and the committee. So I agree, thank you, those that can be there. We need to be there. The community needs to be there to say, this matters to our community.
Thank you, Chair. Just two things to also state that kind of come off of what Marco said. And again, we say these things up here, and I want to make sure our community understands what we're talking about. Tennessee is one of 10 states where the school board itself does not control their own finances. It is entirely controlled by the county commission. So to the point, we are going and asking our county commissioners to fund our own budget. The second thing is the maintenance of effort, just to make sure that the entire public understands. Maintenance of effort is that the county government has to fund our school system to at least the same dollar amount they did the year before, unless there is a considerable drop in student population. So if they gave us that $6 million last year, the maintenance of effort for this year would have been $6 million higher.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dr.
If there's not, I just think Marco, what he was saying was a great segue, but if somebody else has something on this.
No lights right now.
So,
Go ahead.
you know, I think to your point, there's an education component, and I'm gonna, this is kind of going back to our values, but I want to go to this. We had this conversation during PECA the other day, because we are hearing from teachers about raises. We're hearing from, you know, school leaders about the need for additional resources going directly to schools. We 100% agree with that. Like if you ask me today, 3 biggest priorities, it would be increasing salaries, specifically getting, you know, those steps that are below 50 up to 50 as quickly as we can, and then putting as many resources into the supplemental dollars for schools as we can, right? And that's what we're hearing from, you know, aligns with what we're saying to what teachers are saying. there are a couple things that are working against us here, though. So, PECA, we were talking about this, as inflation's going up. We're hearing people say, well, the raises that the school board gives us should match inflation. That is what I said to Jeanette Omarkel. I said, Jeanette, what happens when inflation goes up to school systems like ours? What happens to the revenue and the dollars that we have? We lose spending power, which means we're actually lowering the dollars that we have to invest in salaries, to invest in supplemental dollars, right? And so I want to be clear that, and I tell people this all the time, I'm very confident that this board is interested in compensating our employees to the best of our ability. Right now, we're being limited by three things. We're losing COVID relief dollars. Then inflation is really, really high, and we're not getting, the resources that we historically have from county property taxes.
I know we can talk about this a lot, so I just want to close to wrap kind of two of those things together. We talked about property values. Maybe last month or 2 months ago, a teacher spoke about her personal impact on property costs, rental costs, what she was paying 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, which reduces the amount of money she has for discretionary purposes or even food. And although our rents are increasing in Chattanooga at exponential rates, the property value of the property taxes that are being collected off of these opportunities are only increasing at 2%. So our teachers, who are having to pay twice what they were paying in rent before, are only receiving, as a whole education system, a 2% annual increase. So in a sense, we are ensuring that this is not sustainable. The cost of living in a home in Chattanooga, we all know, are increasing substantially. The way we are coming back as Hamilton County to fund for that reality is not coming close to matching that cost. So property values, property costs are going skyrocketing. The money teachers have to be able to cover those costs is maintaining the same. So it's not sustainable long term. So ideally, as a community, we can only present the budget, but as a community, we need to understand that if we want to support education, we're going to have to back it up with our advocacy.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one quick, I'm sorry. Dr. Robertson, you said the top 3 items that you had were increased salaries, compensation, supplemental dollars into schools, and forgive me, I missed the third.
I kind of put a sub in there of I think it's steps 1 through, Zach behind me, I think it's like first year teachers through 4 years that are below 50,000.
It's like 2 with 1 B.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I have no lights. Mary Ellen, were you finished speaking to this? Thank you. We got a lot of work to do. Sounds like. So we appreciate you. Committee chair updates.
Can I talk about the budget?
Go ahead.
Move on.
So,
We'll meet in April. We'll to be determined, we will have meetings.
okay. Ms. Jones, facilities.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd love to.
There is a
Waiting on
Dr.
bonds.
Robertson, there's a slight update, Dr. Robertson.
You want me to get? So spoke to Ms. Jones today, spoke with, again, mayor's office, and looks like the bonding of the bond is going to be later than what we were thinking. Thought would have already happened. It's probably going to be July. Conversations about how do we get ready and expedite. So one of the things is we know that 3 in particular projects are going to be challenging. The Hickson Elementary, or the elementary school at DuPont, the Clifton Hills project, and the Soddy project. Soddy Daisy project, sorry. And so we were going back and forth about how could we get ahead of this, and he agreed to go into a contract with a architect that would help us get better numbers and options for those. This is not the architect that would design. It's basically like a Clifton Hills to be able to go in and say, your options are to renovate this portion, add on here, X, Y, Z, and here are some real numbers with it. And so we are moving forward with that, and as soon as we have an update from it, we'll let you know.
Important to note that the county's paying for that.
Yes.
We're not paying for that.
Yes.
We don't have any money.
I don't have any of our
And
own.
also, Sunny Daisy High School got their parking lot paved, and I appreciate that.
I think we got the stripes fixed, too.
Yeah, like, fix the stripes, thank you.
I'm gonna be honest here, I have no idea what you said, Mr. Urban. What did they
She
get?
said Saturday the high school got their parking lot paved.
Thank you very much. I wasn't
Ladies
kidding.
just got allergies, don't be doing all like that.
Okay. Joe Wingate's going to join us in a little while. He had he coaches middle school baseball, and they had a game, but he'll be with us at about 6 o'clock or shortly thereafter. Mr. Connor, legislative updates?
Yeah, it is heavy moving. There was a lot going on yesterday. I was on the Hill and got to speak to almost all of our representatives. There's a bunch of things in committee. I won't bore you with details now, but please know that the session should be wrapping up in mid to late April. And as soon as I find an ending date of the session, I will schedule a public meeting to discuss all the things that are in contest to us locally and statewide.
Did I miss anybody? I don't think I did.
Yeah,
I did? Okay, go
I have a
ahead.
question regarding the new schools or the renovations. Will we get a list of required things that will be in each new school? Like
Yes.
E-labs or
Yeah, so
comm
the-
rooms or?
Yes, ma'am. So, again, when the bond issue goes out, first part of that is selecting an architect. And as soon as those architectural drawings are done, we'll bring all that information. And even before that happens, there is like a list of everything, like the number of regular classrooms, the number of labs, the number of offices, the number of restrooms. So we'll
They
have
will
that.
be given to the architect. Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Okay. All right, let's get into our regular meeting agenda. I do want to mention, Scott, you want to have an executive session, I understand. And so what we'd like to do is maybe wrap this up as quickly as we can and then get over to executive session. And Ms. Ford, you told us there's the conference room in the building next door. So we'll try to go through this and then get to that executive session. Perhaps if Scott don't go to preaching too much, we can get back here and get started with our regular agenda, our regular meeting at 6 o'clock. That would be the goal if we can do that. Okay. So, does anything jump out at anybody that you'd like to discuss? Let's just do it that way. Questions, comments, things that. Go ahead, Doug, Gary.
So on, what is it, 7D, they're under the funds for excellence and the money that's in that, the 3,700,000 something. Are we gonna can we please get an itemized expenditure of how that funding's gonna be used?
Yeah, the majority of them.
It's the turf project.
Yeah, it's the turf project
Turf
for
project.
Ooltewah and Sunny Days.
Right. So that's not involving the money that's going toward Howard and Brainerd then? Strictly,
sir.
strictly the Saudi and,
Yes,
that was really kind of my question there, so. There was 8A1, and I had a question, this might be for Zach. So it says new update job class description for CTE asset and compliance manager. Is that a position we already had, or is that a new position?
The position we already had, person in that position is retiring,
Okay.
and we are, as we've been doing month after month, we're updating job descriptions to make sure like what the person is actually doing is in their job description and not duties as otherwise assigned. So it's a existing position that we're updating the job description.
have two more questions if that's all right.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Under 9B2H, one of the board things it talked about principals having the autonomy for investment earnings, which to me is completely new. I'd never heard of that, where it said an administrator in a school could invest if they had capital.
You're talking about board policy 2.402.
Yes, I believe that's it.
This is a first read. Can we look at this and I'm not sure where that says it. We'll
Okay.
get with you in the next week or so.
And maybe I misinterpreted it, but that's, when I read it, that's how I read it, because I never knew as a principal of the school, I could invest in the stock market or, you know, I'm.
Crypto.
That's right. All right. And then the other one, under salary deductions there, there was just a question I had there too. I'll ask again later on this.
Well, all these policies are first read.
They're all first reads, yeah.
They're all.
Yeah, all right.
Now, we are gonna have to vote on the calendar tonight.
No, sir, it's.
No,
it's
it's a first read as
Yeah.
well? Okay,
Yes.
all right, good. Okay. Anything else that jumps out? Anybody wants to bring up?
I will bring up one last thing, and I
Go
talked
ahead.
with Dr. Robertson about it, and I've continued to get a few calls and that, and Ms. Modrow brought it up. So I have heard from teachers and parents the dislike for the half days. I don't know if there's a way we could revisit that and discuss it, or.
I mean, to be honest with you, it's the board's pleasure. The history of the half days comes from conversations during PECA, I believe it was 3 or 4 years ago, and it was something that the teacher representatives, employee reps advocated for additional planning, and it was a mutual decision in PECA, not only to be a half day, but also to be on Wednesday. It was not the administration's decision at that time. It was a mutual decision, and it's been reflected in the calendars, but 6 votes, right?
And
We can change it. The front door, the back door. Do whatever we want.
Well,
What
and-
Shannon add some context to
Sure.
this too.
Just for the survey percentages, we tried to make it clean on there. When you asked staff about the days, we gave them the option to say, do I want 4 half days, 2 full days, no planning days at all? It was very close to a 30-30-30 split there, right? It was like 36% said the 4 half days, 34% said the 2 full days, 22% said no planning at all. And so since this is a resource for teachers, our decision was just to go with the highest teacher staff percentage there, which was the 4 half days.
What was the participation in that survey?
It is like, you guys might have it in front of you. I think it's around 12 to 1,400, maybe 1,500 if I have it right.
1371.
Okay.
out of 7,
50% of the teachers.
A little less.
So did
more
the
like
maj-
25%.
I'm sorry.
No,
Did the majority want Wednesday?
We didn't ask that question.
Oh, you didn't ask that question.
And did parents get any input into this?
Yes, we did a parent survey as well.
And what was that?
Yeah, it was 22% saying they agree with that. It was 55% that saying that they didn't prefer that. So it was a majority on the parent side.
That wanted the full days instead of the half day?
The way that we, the question actually, trying to keep it clean so there's one answer, was would you prefer 4 half days over 2 full days? And so they could either say like, yes, I prefer that, or no, I don't prefer that. We didn't ask it the same way as which one. I kind of wish we had. Hindsight, yeah.
But they said, no, we don't.
It was 55% that said they did not prefer that, yeah,
Right,
versus
not prefer
22% that said they did. There was also an unsure in the middle. Yeah.
So that doesn't line up with the numbers that we got.
It does. No. Everything she said was right. From what we put on the board packet, right? I was just trying to keep it simple and say 22% said they agreed and 34% said they agreed. She didn't have the full breakdown of what I just gave you there.
And she didn't know the undecided either.
Yeah.
So So she said
But
something
she
like,
flipped
said
it,
78%.
since 22 agreed, the 78
Correct.
didn't, she used the other side.
Absolutely,
That's right,
yeah.
she did.
Tell you something like, one of my favorite professors says is that, everybody uses data, including liars.
I really am offended
I
when
love
he
to
says
say
that.
that to Shannon.
Okay. Larry, did you light up there and go out?
No, I've
Or
got
did I do that? Okay. All right, anything else jump out? I want us to begin to talk about one thing, and I've made some notes, and so just bear with me. It'll take me just a second to read through this, but we are 2.5 years into Dr. Robertson's contract, and I think we need to begin to talk about that, about his contract. First of all, we're the board that hired Dr. Robertson. And this board that's seated here now are the ones that established the strategic plan that he has pursued. This body, this board is had the responsibility to decide whether he's done his job or not, as we've evaluated him. And we're going to have in a few months a lot of new board members, which is hard. And some of them, most of them will be coming in and on a learning curve, and I just feel bad about having that new board being immediately tasked and begin to look at Dr. Robertson's contract. If you'll remember, the dates on his contract run calendar year. And we've talked about, in other words, he came on board in January, so the contract began then in January and runs through, of course, the end of the year. We need to get that contract aligned so that it's July through June. So I think now is just a great time to be able to take a look at this, give Dr. Robertson an endorsement as he's launching the next phase, if you will, of his leadership with our new strategic plan opportunity 2030, and so that he understands and knows that we have confidence in him. I think we also need to look at, if you'll remember, when we hired Dr. Robertson, it was like getting a rookie shortstop, and so we hired him at a relatively low salary if you look at comparable districts across the state with ours. So I think that we need to take a look at that, and I think now is the time. Now we're going to get into, and I'm not sure what it's called. Ben, you might can help me with this, but I know we have a blackout period of where we cannot negotiate or look at a new contract. So timing is pretty critical, and we need to get this done probably at the next board meeting, certainly no later than the May board meeting. What is that blackout time, Mr. Bennett, that we can't discuss
It is
it?
45 days before the general election.
Okay.
So you have, theoretically, you could go to June, there's no sense in putting it off until then. I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, April is a good time to discuss it. May is probably the last time to do it where it's not a rush.
Okay.
Which one's Dr. Robertson again?
It's awkward.
Okay.
On the way out.
Mr. Conlon.
I support that for sure, and I think that it's also not just intelligent to put it in line with the budgeting season, but every other superintendent's contract. And one more further part of legality, by discussing it now, we have given the proper 1 month notice that we will be discussing it. So we are in, compliance also.
So just to clarify, two things to look at. You're suggesting we need to look at salary and we need to look at extension. I'm not sure the process regarding salary, I would want data, so that it's not just I'm throwing something at the air. And normally, like in the work that I do, like there is a compensation study so that we know on average, this is what a similar superintendent in similar districts across the country and in the region will be making. So I would just ask for that. However, that obviously can't be provided by the staff, so we'd have to figure out, I don't know if it's Mr. Bennett or who would provide that for us. So I would just ask for that. Yeah, thank you.
So, I guess what I'm asking here is for you to do just that and begin to put together a template for us to look at, discuss, and get voted on, certainly no later than the May, budget, or May, board meeting.
Glad to do it.
Okay, is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Almost the May board meeting on May 16th. That's my birthday, I'm not spending it with y'all. I don't like
It
that.
actually is May 16th. That's May 9th. It's May 9th.
We said this was
May 9th, isn't it?
May 16th.
Okay.
It's her birthday. It's her birthday.
It's actually a 15 days public notice. But what I'm hearing from the board is the will of the board to be done in April, so I think we can satisfy that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, anything else before we adjourn our work session and go into executive session?
We're good.
So hearing none, so Mr. Bennett will adjourn our, or we'll have our executive session in the meeting next door. And for you guys that are here, hopefully we'll be back pretty soon. We're gonna be a little bit late getting our 6 o'clock meeting started, I'm sure, but, we're going into executive session. We'll get back over here just as quick as we can.